Welcome to the G-Man Reviews podcast. Today's episode is about Total Warhammer 3 and is titled, Why Markus Wulfhart is one of the Empire's most interesting legendary lords. So the first thing that we're going to discuss is why Markus Wulfhart feels so different from other Empire lords. So most Empire campaigns in Total War Warhammer 3 tend to drift toward a familiar formula. Players build towards strong gunpowder units, reliable front lines, and artillery that can delete enemies before they ever reach the line. It works, and because it works so well, it often becomes the default way people approach the faction. That is exactly why Markus Wulfhart stands out. He is one of the most interesting legendary lords in the Empire because his campaign pushes you away from the standard artillery-heavy plan and toward a more mobile, aggressive hunter-style army. Instead of immediately relying on cannons and static gun lines, Markus encourages you to use units like huntsmen, cavalry, and specialist heroes in ways that feel very different from a normal Empire campaign. So let's talk about now why Markus disrupts the standard Empire playstyle. So a lot of Empire campaigns reward a predictable progression. Once your economy improves and your building chains develop, it becomes easy to lean into the faction's most famous strengths: artillery, gunpowder, and combined arms formations. Markus Wulfhart interrupts that pattern. His faction starts with a more limited roster, and stronger reinforcements are tied to his unique campaign systems, rather than simply following the normal early recruitment path. That changes the pacing of the campaign, and more importantly changes the armies you end up fielding. With Markus, you do not just rush towards the same military setup you would use in a Karl Franz campaign. You are forced to work within the constraints of the expedition, and that makes the entire campaign feel fresher and more distinct. So let's talk next about how acclaim changes how you build your campaign. One of the biggest reasons Markus feels so different is the acclaim system. Unlike other Empire factions, Markus cannot simply unlock the full value of his building chains the moment he reaches the required settlement tier. Many important military options are tied to acclaim, which is earned by expanding, taking settlements, and advancing the expedition. This matters because it shapes the order in which you gain access to important units and upgrades. Instead of naturally rushing towards the most familiar late-game Empire tools, you are encouraged to make more use of infantry, huntsmen, cavalry, and other practical expedition units much earlier. That gives Markus a campaign identity that feels different from the usual Empire snowball. Imperial supplies strengthen the expedition theme. So the Imperial supplies mechanic reinforces this even more. As Markus gains momentum, the hostility rises. He receives support from the Empire in the form of supplies and reinforcements. This helps shape your army in a way that feels tied to the campaign's theme, rather than just ordinary provincial development. Instead of simply building the same best army every time, your military growth feels like the result of an ongoing Imperial expedition receiving outside support. That makes the campaign feel reactive and thematic. You are not just another Empire lord building a safe inland empire, you are leading a dangerous frontier force in hostile territory. Markus makes huntsmen feel important. So this is where Markus Wulfhart becomes especially interesting. In many Empire campaigns, huntsmen can feel like a niche or secondary choice. They are not bad, but they are rarely the first unit players build around. In a lot of playthroughs, they are overshadowed by more conventional Empire options. Under Markus, that changes. He gives players a real reason to value huntsmen, and his campaign makes far better use of them than a standard Empire run ever would. They stop feeling like a side option and start feeling like a genuine core unit. And that is one of the clearest signs of good legendary lord design. A strong lord does not just buff the best units, a strong lord can make overlooked units feel exciting and worthwhile. let's talk about why Huntsman works so well in Marcus's campaign. The first reason Huntsmen shine under Marcus is the kind of enemies he fights. His campaign places him in Lustria, where you constantly are dealing with large monsters, dinosaurs, dangerous mobile enemies, and factions that punish passive play. In that environment, anti-large missile infantry becomes far more valuable than it might feel in a more standard Empire campaign. Huntsmen are not just usable here, they make practical tactical sense. The second reason is Marcus himself. His skills and faction design make Huntsmen far stronger and more relevant than they would normally be. That gives them a clear battlefield role and helps them feel like an essential part of the campaign rather than a filler unit. And the real reason that is because of Markus Wulfhart's sleight of hand skill that he unlocks. It basically doubles the damage that Huntsman units do. And he also has other ways of buffing their damage further. So he takes Huntsman from okay to like absolutely brilliant. So next let's talk about why the campaign is built around synergy. What makes Marcus so fun is that the campaign is not just about one unit being strong in isolation. It is how the whole army works together. Marcus, his unique heroes and his specialist units combine to create a playstyle focused on isolating and destroying important targets. Rather than simply setting up a static line and letting artillery do all the work, you are encouraged to think more actively about positioning, pressure, and priority targets. And that gives the campaign a much stronger battlefield identity. You're not using Huntsmen just because they happen to be available. You're using them because the entire campaign framework makes them effective, satisfying, and thematic. Let's talk next about how Markus Wulfhart's unique heroes add even more personality. So another reason why Marcus feels different is his access to unique heroes. These characters are not just there for flavor, they reinforce the idea that this campaign is about elite specialists, dangerous hunts, and a focused expeditionary force rather than a standard Imperial army. That makes Marcus's campaign feel much more character-driven than the average Empire playthrough. Instead of simply recruiting a generic stack and rolling forward, you feel like you are building a proper hunting party designed to take down dangerous enemies in a hostile environment. So let's talk next about how Marcus also gives cavalry more relevance. So huntsmen are the obvious standout, but cavalry matters too. Because Marcus does not instantly become the full late-game Empire war machine, fast support units become more valuable. Knights can screen your missile troops, pressure skirmishers, chase routing enemies, and help control the battlefield while your ranged units and heroes deal with the most dangerous threats. This is another reason the campaign feels different from the normal Empire formula. And the thing about Marcus is that he unlocks the barracks and the livery building earlier than other things. So his campaign sort of incentivizes you towards this playstyle. And so instead of relying on artillery to dominate the battle from a safe distance, Marcus often rewards movement, positioning, and tactical flexibility. And that makes cavalry feel more useful and more integrated into the army's actual gameplay. So let's talk next about how Marcus makes the Empire feel more active. So one of the strongest arguments in Markus Wulfhart's favor is that he makes the Empire feel less passive. A lot of Empire gameplay can become very static. You set up your line, protect your artillery, and let the enemy come to you. There is nothing wrong with that, but it can become repetitive. Marcus changes that. His campaign encourages kiting, screening, monster focus, repositioning, and active use of terrain and mobility. Even when you are winning, it often feels like you are making more decisions moment to moment than you would in a typical artillery-focused Empire campaign. And that makes the campaign more engaging for players who want a more hands-on experience. So, let's talk next about why Markus Wulfhart is so memorable. So Markus Wulfhart is not interesting simply because he is powerful. He's interesting because he changes player behavior. He takes familiar Empire tools and makes you see them differently. He turns Huntsmen into a core unit. He makes cavalry feel more relevant. He makes heroes feel central to the campaign's identity. And he creates a version of the Empire that feels like a frontier survival expedition rather than a fully developed military state. That is what makes him memorable. The best legendary lords are not always the ones who are strongest on paper. Sometimes they are the ones who force players to rethink the faction, experiment with units they normally ignore, and approach the campaign in a genuinely different way. Markus Wulfhart is one of the best examples of that. Let's talk now about our final thoughts. So if you judge a legendary lord by how much they change the way you play, then Markus Wulfhart deserves to be one of the Empire's most interesting lords. Instead of another quick rush to artillery, he gives you a campaign built around specialists, mobility, monster hunting, and battlefield control. He pushes you towards units like huntsmen and knights that many players would otherwise overlook. And that makes his campaign feel fresh even to experienced Empire players. He does not just make the Empire stronger, he makes the Empire more interesting. This was the G-Man Reviews podcast. Thank you for watching. Please also check out the G-Man Reviews blog, which will have the written article version of this podcast, just in case you want to read it. This was G-Man Reviews, signing off.